All right. Well, I guess we should dig into this, huh? Dig into the synth under pressure.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right.
I actually did take a couple pages of notes today, so I do
Excellent. Good. I got 2 pages, so
Okay.
I don't
I'm
think we have a-
exhausted after that Browns game, so we'll see how this
yeah.
goes.
Dad called me and asked me if I was
Dreadbull.
watching. I'm like, no. He told me
That was exhausting. Holy
it
crap.
was a really good game. He likes the Chargers, but he likes high scoring games.
It was that.
Greetings! This is David DePay from Bergen's Jail, and you are listening to Heavy Metal Horror! Stay tuned for more metal and horror! Yow!
I am Montag, master of illusion. What goes up must come down, but not always.
Hey, this is Chop Top. This could be a heavy rush.
And Dreadbull.
And you are listening to Heavy Metal Horror. Oh, kitties. Oof. Welcome back. We are doing our 3rd episode of Deep Dive into Rush. Tonight, we are getting into the synth-heavy years, 1982 to what, 89? I think is that what we're doing? Yeah,
that sounds about right.
Album? Yeah, Mike. Yeah,
yeah,
I
I think so. That's
89
right.
was the-
Yeah,
yeah.
we are
Yes.
covering albums Signals, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, Hold Your Fire, and A Show of Hands. I will just kind of give my overview of Signals before we kind of get into it. Maybe we can just kind of go around and give our overview. But
Yeah, sure.
this heavy synths and tight radio-friendly songs punctuate this follow-up to Moving Pictures. Peart's lyrics move from fantasy to both personal and global. While the grandeur of their experimental albums is fading in the recent distance, Rush's new commercial prog direction never lets us forget that they're consummate crafters of great songs. Yes, there's
That was
my
way too professional. What,
there's
did you
my
pay
trenchant.
somebody to write that?
Yeah, hey, I'm a good
What is this
writer,
crap?
man.
What
I'm
is
getting
this crap?
paid
right.
$55 an hour to write. That's the going rate for
Way
writing.
too sterile.
like some of these albums, you know.
Oh, okay. You're
No,
making
I
a point
don't.
there.
I don't think I don't find them sterile at all, actually. But
No,
we'll get into it. No.
surprisingly not.
Yeah,
as-
that's the
As much
crazy.
as I was, yeah.
So there's my overview. What do you guys? You have an overview? Something less sterile?
So yeah, for me, I thought this was if we're talking, are we just talking Signals or this whole era?
No, the whole era. I was just kind of giving
Okay.
a trenchant overview of the era.
Yeah,
Like
I
that
don't
word,
really.
trenchant?
I didn't write up a thespian breakdown of the of the whole era.
Come on, man, Dreadbull, do your job.
But yeah, this is the new wave of Canadian prog metal, I guess you could call it. The new wave era, a very, I would say, divisive era for Rush. Either you love it or hate it. It seems to me, as I was researching this and digging into people's comments and reactions. Yeah, it's kind of a love-hate era for Rush, I think, in a lot of ways, because it's very different. It's a
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. I thought, guys, it was very a poppy era for Rush. It
I
was
wrote Poppy a lot.
there's a lot of especially Signals, but and we'll get into that, but a lot of almost reggae kind of influence. There's a
Mhm.
stop kind of guitar thing by Lyson, which was
a lot of
totally
upbeat
different
stuff.
compared. Yeah.
Right.
And in a sense, I think as time went on, they got more control over it. And we'll get into that. I think there's a couple albums that are very synth heavy as opposed to some of the later era material. I think they became more balanced with it. But the early stuff is just very it's all synth. It's all synth, all the time. It was just that's what it was for me. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of memorable songs, and we will definitely get to. We'll definitely get to them.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, let's get into it. Let's start with Signals. Chop, I know that your favorite Rush song is on this album. I think I know what that song is. So why don't you go ahead and start with Signals, and let's work our way
Yeah.
through the tracks.
Thank you. My favorite Rush song of all time is Subdivisions. For me, lyrically and personally and everything I've been through, it just speaks to me. That is just, Neil Peart had his finger on the pulse of what was going on with Young America and everything. And I think that's Young America or Young Worldwide. He had his finger on the pulse. He knew what was going on. And for me, it's very emotional. It's very hard hitting. That chorus is fantastic. And Subdivisions. We're talking about how we are a subdivision as human beings and how we still do that to this day. And we really don't deserve to do that. We don't have to do that. But back in 82, I mean, this was still something that is going on and very prevalently today. And it's haunting. I love it. I love everything about that song. So,
I mean, there's always been cliques of popular and unpopular kids. That's nothing new. Going back to,
right.
I think since probably we started getting ourselves into large enough groups that we didn't, that were beyond familial. But he does talk about that whole idea of the sterile suburbs and that, as he says, the restless dream of youth. There's this contradiction for kids who are thoughtful and pensive in high school, and they're not part of the cool, cliques. And as much as Dreadbull and I were really popular, no, we were like spending our weekends playing D&D and not getting late. That was
that. Yeah.
right. But I as the great quote says,
We're just ahead of our time.
I didn't play all that D&D and not learn something about bravery. So
I think the emotiveness of it for me is just the emotion with that song, and
Right.
just attached to what I've personally been through, and maybe many others, is just what draws me. That's my favorite Rush song of all time. Just something that I never get enough of. So,
Dreadbull.
Yeah, I think this is another classic Neil Peart, written song. Very cerebral. He tackles social issues very well in his music, and there's always a lot of layers going on. And this is about sort of conformity being, the antithesis of creativity, among other things. But yeah, I love this song too. I think this song would have felt very at home on Moving Pictures. In fact, we'll get into it, but I think the first 2 or 3 songs on this album almost feel like Moving Pictures leftovers in a way. It makes me wonder if I couldn't find any info on it, but it makes me wonder
I got a great
they
point
had this.
with that too.
Okay.
Dreadbull.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if they had some leftover that didn't make that some.
I think they usually do. There's always like B-sides and they always play, but I didn't pick up on that. It's interesting that you say that, Dredd, because I didn't get that sense at all, because they weren't
okay.
They lack the guitar. They're so focused on the synthesizer, but I know that was something that Geddy Lee was really getting into. Just like their influences with reggae and all those things, they always bring them to the table. And synthesizers, they were moving into that synth direction because, it was the 80s. I mean, a lot of the pop bands were all synth driven, and they were bringing that into their music,
Yeah, and I actually read that I think it was Geddy that in an interview had said that this was a conscious effort to not, what he said, quote, play it safe and make another Moving Pictures album, which is a shame. The Moving Pictures Part 2 would have been wonderful. I'd have been all up for that.
I know.
This was a conscious effort by them to move away from that and do something different. And everyone's opinion on how that went varies, but
I
thought that's
I agree. I'm sorry, I agree with Dreadbull though. I think there's a lot of leftover stuff that could have been easily a Moving Pictures Part 2.
Yeah, particularly I thought a little early.
I can't wait to get to that. Yeah.
Well, I remember hearing this album when I was in high school band. had just started getting into Rush, and there's the discussion amongst the drummers about this band, because this was like an album that they had purposely set to, like, let's do every song in 4/4 time, and compared to like earlier Rush, it's a quote unquote boring album in that respect. Like, it's not adventurous. You're not going to hear hemispheres and all these crazy time changes, or
Right.
but yeah, but it's a stellar album. I mean, I love Subdivisions.
Yeah.
It's this idea about being an outcast in an the all important high school years, and it really taps into those familiar feelings of isolation and frustration. But since we all love that angst in that song, but the next song, Analog Kid. This is one of my favorite songs of all time for Rush, especially on this album. It's light and bouncy. It makes me feel like summer. And like, you have these lyrics like fawn-eyed girl with sun-brown skin, like just gorgeous imagery. And I'm so grateful that I finally got to hear them play this song on the Clockwork Angels tour. That first like hour, it was all like 80s stuff from these albums that I'd never heard live. Most of it was I'd never heard live before. I was like, oh my God, I'm like hearing stuff from Signals. I'm hearing stuff from Grace Under Pressure and Moving, or Power Windows. I'm like, oh, this is awesome, And then when they played Analog Kid, I was like, oh, because there's just something about this song that I really, really love. Well, I think I said what it was that I loved, but so I'll go ahead, Chop.
Well, thank you, Montag. That's a great point. I think Analog Kid, I wrote down the guitar riff sounds a lot like something could have come off of Moving Pictures, Redbird Cheddar-like. That there's like a main guitar riff, like it's almost like Redbird Cheddar-like. I'm like, And it goes back into what me and Dreadbull were talking about. It's like, is this Moving Pictures leftovers? Is there thing? But leftovers, we'll take them. It just, I really enjoy that riff in that song. That's the thing that stands out to me, the main riff for Analog Kid. And it's a fantastic tune. Great choice.
Yeah, another one. I love this song too, and I think I love the time change and the really nice time change and the really emotional feel to the chorus. And this song is very emotional. It's funny, Montag, you mentioned that line, the fawn-eyed girl with the sun-brown legs. I found a note where Neil actually wrote that line about a girl that he met while that he was camping in Canton, Ohio with his family when he was a kid. And he fell in love with her. And I guess apparently he wrote letters to her like all summer long after he went back home. But that line was inspired by a girl he met
in Canton.
In Canton, Ohio.
Right. Welcome, fans, Ohio.
In the summer of 1967.
No wonder Rush loves Ohio so much. Cleveland, Canton. My God.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
One of Neil's early loves was met there. She was from Beach City.
Let's go. What a life he led, and I mean his journeys, and to have anything of his writings. Is amazing.
If you listen to his interviews, it's just I could sit there and listen to him all day. He's so thoughtful and articulate, and just like working on a higher level, but also very accessible. He's precise and. But just that's beautiful. I love that story. That's awesome.
Great. Thanks, Trey.
Chemistry. Here's another lyrical success I find, where Pert plays with the idea of physical attraction in scientific terms. I mean, we've used this term like there's chemistry between us, but now he's bringing or biology. And the whole thing of these clever word plays about relationships and attraction, and that it's got that music, it's got that reggae in the chorus. You got that kind of upbeat, and then also the drum fills are kind of Spartan and a little more of that reggae feel. But it's a great tune.
I put on my list, Chemistry was underrated classic, and I love the melody. And I think Montag on Test for Echo, they played Chemistry like. It's chemistry. They're playing fucking chemistry.
Very well have been,
And it was it's underrated song. It's underrated in the lyrics, underrated in the meaning. I think it's one of the most underrated songs of Rush's catalog, period.
Yeah, I agree. Great song. Like I think you summed it up pretty well, but another example of like Neil, he loves to write lyrics that have a lot of layers to it and a lot of different meaning and stuff. Not only like pure chemistry. This was about like how when you mix chemicals, you get these real precise outcome. If you mix two chemicals, you know how it's gonna, what result will be. But when two
Right.
people, connect, the outcomes are unpredictable. So there's this like, it's just, this guy works on, multiple
what's so
levels all at
mystical
one time.
about Neil was a lot of things. Sorry, Joe. What really mixes, so great with Neil's lyrics, his insight on the human condition with everything.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he just, wherever he draws from it, what an intelligent, fantastic man and drummer that he was to draw upon all those things. You put it musically, and that yet you're sitting there even after you listen to many listens, you're like, oh, I get this now.
Yeah.
I got that. And
I think
is
he
so
mentioned why that happened is because they had the luxury of seeing the world. They were traveled. And then once he started riding his bicycle and then motorcycle,
right.
he got to see things at a much different pace. And just traveling the world allows you a larger, you don't have these tiny little lenses that are colored by the color of your national flag. You have these much larger pictures. You can see things and see people and struggles. And he found riding through the Bible Belt of America very interesting because every sign was turn to Jesus and this and that. And as someone who was at least an agnostic, he found very, very interesting an experience, because you don't have that up in Canada, these rows and rows of signs along roads about repenting and things. So, but I think that's part of what it is. Just, he saw the world, and that changes his view. And as the albums will progress, when he writes about these larger issues, I think it's because they've had the opportunity to see things that a few other people have had the chance. So he kind of brings that experience out in his lyrics in a way so that everyone can think about those things in ways that are not so myopic and self-centered, So,
and Neil just doesn't go sightseeing. He doesn't go to, oh, there's the Eiffel Tower, I'm going to take a couple of pictures, oh, that's neat, and then move on. He's always taking in everything and the emotion and the feel of things, and he's always observing and mulling this stuff over. It's nothing. He just doesn't just simply go see things.
Right.
He's just, I think his brain is always turning all the time.
Oh yeah.
And he really liked to meet with people and talk with them, and in diners and things. And he really loved it when people didn't know who he was. That's, he could just talk as two human beings and get to know people. So he really was a people person. He just didn't like adulation from fans. He was embarrassed.
Totally squared away. Like, I don't want nothing to do with that.
He wasn't a fame person. He was just a person.
It was, it was embarrassing for him, and so, and that's
God
it.
bless you, Neil. God bless you.
I miss you, man. Miss the professor. So, the next song on Signals, we got Digital Man. We definitely have that reggae influenced rhythms. I think the reggae stuff lifts this song from overt simplicity and familiarity. And Peart has a series of these like man songs, Digital Man, New World Man, and as we see other songs pop up on other albums that carry the same kind of theme. They're a little bit bleak in a way, this one, and carry the theme of change and tradition or transition, I think. And so it's kind of this sense of trying to find a place in this new digital world that the early 80s was affording us. This is 1982, so we didn't have social media, we didn't have Zoom. We had the Coleco quarterback, and we were happy to have that. Dreadbull and I got
till the buttons were up.
Baseball game, right? Exactly. So anyway,
on this song, I had notes that it's a very bouncy song, and the standout bass lines for Geddy on it. I mean, he shines on the song. It was just, for me, it had a reggae appeal, but man, Geddy had some of these off kilter kind of bass lines that were but it fit. It was like, wow, I really enjoy it for that part. It was just very bouncy and a very happy song for Rush. So yeah, I like Digital Man quite a lot.
Yeah, it's a little more synth. They're leaning into the synth sound a little more here. Even the
Right.
guitars sound kind of ethereal, or maybe not ethereal is the right word, but a little more echoey and synthy, I guess. But like you said, with the little reggae beats and stuff in there, it adds something unique and interesting, and takes what would be a pop, normal, and that's what I found. I think going through all this whole era of Rush, it's like on the surface, you're like, okay, it's kind of very poppy and new wavy, and it's not a genre I particularly care for, but there's always something in there that Rush adds that makes it special, and that makes it
Great
Rush,
point.
and there's never a throwaway track,
Right.
ever, just like okay, just throw something down for radio play or something. So
Right. I agree. And yeah, I totally agree. Even though like this Signals has an album that started off and it's kind of fluctuated at times, but it's a persistently good album. There's all the songs. I mean, there are a few Rush albums that are not regularly in my playlist that I kind of feel like I need to put them back in, but this is not, they come later. But yeah, this is a solid album. And I like the next song too, The Weapon, where politics comes into play here. Where this is in a way kind of follows Witch Hunt for me. Is it the Fear? Is that the next one?
It's part of the Fear trilogy. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Fear
Which
trilogy.
I think
Okay.
extended to part 4 eventually. They made it to 4 part. But
okay.
yeah. So here Pierce talking about what he calls the larger bowl, as he does on another song, and humanity's place in an increasingly threatening society. And we remember what was going on in the early 80s. I mean, the Cold War was really warm, and threats that these themes will play out in these albums, more so in future albums. But this was part of the backdrop, I think, and what was going on. So it's a very relevant song then. I think it's still relevant to the same kind of fear of the government, fear of the outsider. We all have these worries. So it's a smart song.
Interesting thing about The Weapon, and lots of laughs. The intro music kind of reminded me of "You Can Dance If You Want To." You can, That's what got me right from the beginning. I'm like, why am I thinking of that song when this is freaking Rush? But yeah, it did. But yeah, I mean, it was insightful, and it was kind of like, warning. There's a warning kind of it, and there is that Montag. There is that whole throughout this scene of the '80s, especially. They're warning against different things. There's a threatening nature about things underneath. Even though music's beautiful, and you're like, look at some of those lyrics. And we'll get to the next album that is pretty dark.
There's more into that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
When I listened more to that one, I was like, Montag was right on that. So
yeah.
All
right.
Yeah, the weird thing about the Fear trilogy, or if it's now 4, but they're in reverse order. So part 3 was actually The Witch Hunt from Moving Pictures.
Oh,
This is part 2, and then part 1 is The Enemy Within from Grace Under Pressure.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Neil said he did that because the concepts in each song he thought he started with the more easily accessible concepts, and I can get more into this later. I've got more notes on it, but he thought the concept in Witch Hunt was a little easier to grasp, and it got a little more difficult as he went along. So he just did them in reverse order.
Interesting.
So that was kind of weird.
I can't imagine Witch Hunt being on this album. I mean, Witch Hunt sounds like it does because it's on Moving Pictures. That sonic, the instrumentation. I think if you had added the keyboards come in during the chorus, and they were very effective. But I think if you had done it in this era or under Grace Under Pressure, you would have lost that crazy great guitar. So that's interesting how these songs kind of played out. But
I think this album, I put in my notes, is definitely a product of its time. There's some poppy, heavy synth. It's very, out of all this era, I think this is the most heavy synth saturated album. And I think it was just part of that. They wanted to go a new direction. And I think Geddy wanted to, show his prowess and do some different things.
I think there's one that's heavier, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
But I agree. I mean, we're definitely in that. That's why it's Synth Under Pressure. I mean, these albums have that unique, that sound that kind of connects them. So
yeah.
Got any more to say about the weapon there, Dread?
No. This one, other than like, sorry, the the lyrics and stuff. But musically, the song just doesn't do much for me. I don't care.
It's pretty
for
straightforward.
It, just musically.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
a lot of that. The music isn't as memorable. The focus becomes on the lyrics and writing these kind of contained 4 and 5 and 6 minute songs. There's not a lot of grandeur, but the songs are compact and they're still memorable because I can hear the weapon in my head right now. And they're still competent songs. That's the thing. They've moved into a really competent band, with self-imposed limitations on what they were doing. They worked really well within their self-imposed parameters. So the next one is New World Man. I think the music is really buoyant and upbeat, but the lyrics are more cynical. Here's Neil Pearce talking about this larger global themes that are persistent. And I find this almost to be a follow-up or a sequel to Tom Sawyer in a way, because Tom has that, no, his mind is not for rent to any god or government, always hopeful yet discontent. That sounds a lot like the New World Man. He's wise enough to win the world, but fool enough to lose it. There's this dichotomy going on with New World Man that I find it really appealing. And I think it's just, here's again, the theme is resonating from album to album,
I thought this was a, dare I say, another quiet classic on this album. They played it live, obviously. It's been a staple show for many times, but you don't hear, you're not hearing that on the radio. You're not hearing that. But I just thought it was a quiet classic for some reason. And great lyrics, of course. And yeah, Montag, you make a very good call on that. That could be very much Tom Sawyer or two.
I'm really smart. I'm really smart that way.
Yeah, I know you are. But yeah.
But humble about it.
agree with
Yeah.
you on-
I don't like to talk about my humility. That's right.
Yeah.
Dread, what do you got to say about New
Yeah,
World
yeah.
Man?
For me, solid song. Interesting. To me, this almost sounds like it could have come off Permanent Waves. For some reason, I kept getting Permanent Waves vibes from this song. I'm not exactly sure why.
Good point.
But surprisingly, this song hit #1 in Canada, and it was the highest ever song in the U.S. It hit 21 on the top 40 charts, the highest ever Rush song in the U.S.
Oh my God.
Which really shocked me. I
Yeah.
thought, how is Tom Sawyer not the #1 song in the U.S. or Spirit of Radio?
That's crazy.
I think I think those albums got them popular, but I don't know, when Signals came out, they must have been kind of riding the popularity
I think
of Moving Pictures.
Yeah, Moving Pictures broke them through, and then they were just ready for the radio play.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more interesting thing about this song: this was written one day and recorded the next day. They had 3 minutes and 57 seconds left to fill up one side of the album when they were recording, so they made this song to exactly fill up the space they had left.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
That's crazy.
And so they wrote it one day, recorded it the next, and that was that.
Okay, guys, we got to come up with a great pop song with under 4 minutes. Go.
Yeah. Go.
Okay,
And
Neil,
you got one day.
trenchant lyrics that are about global issues, but are very personal.
Right.
He's like, okay, guys. 20 minutes later.
Right. Done.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's
Wow.
Yeah, that just says something about their abilities as musicians to just create.
And their chemistry between them, that they could trust one another to do this, and then come up with a song that not only a song, but song of like one of like what 8 on the album. I mean, it's like, come on, we gotta fit it in. That's awesome. They wouldn't say, we'll just cut it 4 minutes short.
Yeah, this is not 4 minutes of just filler. This is
No,
really
it's a good
a song that hit #1 in Canada.
That's great. God, we should do more of that.
Oh my gosh.
Ain't it?
Oh,
Yeah, let's just
wow.
put them on a timer. Let's write an album.
That's
You got like
right.
1 day to write
right.
each song.
Wow, that's crazy. The next song is Losing It. I find this to be really haunting and mournful. Easily the most emotionally draining song since The Bridge
Yes.
For Crest of Steel. The theme of loss is palpable, and you can hear that ache and that anger of loss in the electric violin solo. I think this is a beautiful song, and it is supremely sad and heartbreaking. But I love it, and I'm really glad that they finally played it on the R40 tour. They never had played it live because of
Wow.
the electric violin solo, but they got the guy who
Mm.
played it on the album to tour with them, and he got to play it. So
Is that the instrument I was hearing? I was trying to
electric
figure out what
violin.
that was.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and on
That's
the
beautiful.
R40, if you buy the CDs, it comes with 2 versions of Losing It, because they did the whole show, then they had like a half hour left, because they wanted to pack it for the fans, and they put it on a second time from a different show, because they realized that they had never played before, and the fans would probably like to hear another version of it, so they threw it on there,
Wow.
which I thought was great. But
Yeah.
I love it. It's just a bitter sweet, bitter. Well, there's no sweet to it. It's just a loss, heartbreaking loss song. Powerful.
Montag, I'm right there with you. I put down my notes. Beautiful guitar and keyboard interplay. I love the melody and the subject matter of the song. It's just a gorgeous song.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. That's what I was made notes about. The emotion of the song is definitely I think the most emotionally evocative song on the album.
Yeah.
Which is for this era. As we go on, we'll talk about it, but in emotional reaction for me was few and far between. So I struggled finding emotional connections to a lot of this music
Mhm.
during this era. But this was one of the songs that did it. And this
Yeah.
was, I think, Neil was a real big Hemingway fan. I think
Mhm.
the lyrics
Yeah.
in this song were pulled from some of Hemingway's novels.
Well, I think, yeah, and also Hemingway himself. That's why he committed suicide. He could not write anymore, and then that he got to the point of where he realized his powers were waning. Excuse me. His powers were waning, and he killed himself. So I think that was definitely an inspiration. Sad one,
Yeah.
but yeah. So all right, then the last song, Countdown. I'm going to say this might be the only kind of weak track. I'll say that in quotes. I like some of the imagery, like the breath of a sleeping white dragon. I like that line. It's a fitting simile for the space shuttle. Great lines like super science mingles with the bright stuff of dreams. That is gorgeous. But Peart gives a truly uncharacteristic cliche in excitement so thick you can cut it with a knife.
Oof.
But he finishes with technology high on the leading edge of life. So I'm thinking, okay, this guy writes one cliche line in over 100 songs. I think we can cut him some slack.
We can deal with that.
But that's what's great about what shows you what's so great about his writing is the fact that we have one line that's kind of and it sticks out like a sore thumb. Like we are so used to gems and fucking poetry from this guy, and he writes like a mediocre line, that a throwaway cliche, and we're all, and for me, I'm like, what? The fact that it's so noticeable when most of the garbage music out there is all cliches and bullshit, is, again, that's a testament to his writing, that his one line stands out, a line of mediocrity stands out in a sea of brilliance,
I put it that it was an interesting way to close the album, but that song never really grabbed me. I just, out of all the other tracks, that one wasn't the last song. So,
right.
Yeah, same. It was a little like on the nose, I thought. They were obviously inspired. They got to watch a shuttle launch, were inspired by it, but not Neil's finest work ever, but just the song itself, it doesn't do a whole lot for me.
The rest of the album before that, I'm like, fuck yeah, but that closer was just not, to me, one of the Rush's strongest closers they've had.
I'm just really glad, since he was so inspired by these great things, I'm glad he wasn't inspired by mundane things. like
Yeah.
like going to the circus and getting some cotton candy. He writes a whole song about that, like I'm
what he
so
had for
glad-
lunch.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pastrami on rye.
Yeah, stretching in my bed.
Couple yeah.
Right, exactly. I'm glad he was inspired by these more elevated themes. I think it's what makes them them.
Yep.
All right, we move on to 1984's Grace Under Pressure. My review as a whole, the keyboards are even more present here. I remember when this album came out, when I mentioned it before, we were all the drummers in the high school band, we were all Rush fans, and we discussed what we took as this intentionally boring 4/4 time. So I was still getting into Rush, so I hadn't fully discovered their older catalog at this time. I didn't really care for the album for a long time, a few tracks notwithstanding, but it really grew on me. And then totally a product of its time, it still manages to stand out as a strong, albeit darkly personal album. And as I was listening again and reading the lyrics, that's when the darkness of this album hit me. It's like, wow, this is a truly dark album that it doesn't always sound dark because of the keyboards, but when you really start applying this, what you're hearing, it really does. This is a dark album that really symbolizes, I think, a bleak Cold War experience. Yeah.
Maybe I put on there maybe their darkest album ever for Rush. I mean, just I went back and I Montag we talked earlier, but looking at the lyrical content and the subject matter of it, I'm like, this is some really heavy shit. This is really dark matter.
Yeah.
And for them to transform it and to put a lot of great songs on there, I was pleasantly surprised with that, but I knew it was dark, and I think it's maybe their darkest album ever, arguably.
Sure, could be.
Yeah, another more further into the synth sort of feel. To me, this is their most synthy sounding, electronic sounding album. I thought more than Signals, for me at least. I didn't listen to this album a lot back in the day. It just never grabbed me, and the synth era never did. But going back and re-listening to it for the show with a little more critical ear, I do at least. I got a better appreciation for the things that are going on underneath, because there is still musical complexity under there. There are some great layering and texturing of the guitars. I mean, Geddy's bass work is phenomenal. Neil is mixing in a lot of like electronic drums and stuff, which is strange.
Yeah,
but it's in it keeps with what they're going after. So I appreciate it more now. It's still just not my vibe out of Rush, but I definitely appreciate what they're doing. Like the Rush magic is still under there. It's still in there. You gotta listen a little closer, and maybe it's not quite as in your face. The musicianship.
Yeah, I think they're
more
really
subtle.
indulging Geddy Lee's love for keyboard, because it was him driving this idea of what he could do with the keyboards. And by the time a couple albums later, I guess it was causing a little bit of tension in the band, a little bit. I mean, for Canadians, there's a little bit of tension. Like Alex, like, I gotta play some songs, give me, and it kind of, I think eventually when they broke out of it, they which we'll talk about in the next show. But I think right now they were just still really interested in experimenting with whatever was going on, So, but first, go ahead, Chop.
Oh, I'm sorry, Monte. Distant Early Warning. Great opening track. I love that chorus. Alex's guitar work shines here, and I just the synth actually complements the guitar melody in a lot of ways, where Signals was overkill. Like when they really got into it, it was like Signals was just, it was just drenched with synths. And I think that this album does a better job, in my opinion, of complementing each other with the guitar and the synth. It's not overpowering each one of the other. That's my opinion. But
yeah, I agree more with Dreadbull and that, where it's a little, it is heavier on the synth. And
maybe I didn't hear it, but I love that. I just love that chorus on Distant Early Warning.
Oh, Distant Early Warnings are great. I mean, we have Cold War sensibilities and imagery that tensions are high between Russia and the United States. You know, Reagan's president. This threat of nuclear war was still fairly high. You know, I mean, our class president, a high school class, when he gave his speech to our class, it was about nuclear war. You know, like, you know, talk about Debbie Downer. You know, so
yeah,
like,
I mean, the 80s were a scary time, man. We
yeah,
were
before the
getting
wall
inundated
came down.
when we were kids, man. That was
Yeah,
yeah, there was a lot of fear around
Right
that.
on.
sure. Yeah, and but it's a great song. It's a great track. You know, it's strong in that regard. But I think this starts off the dark sensibilities of this album. I mean, there are some songs that are lighter, but this is a dark album.
Yes, it is.
And I think following the next song, After Image, you know, this reggae upbeat in the middle of the song, but it's about personal tragedy. I don't know if you had knew about the lyrical content. Yeah, Dreadbull,
Right.
you wanna
Go
tell?
ahead, Dread.
Yeah, it was just a friend of Neil, Robbie Whelan, who died in a car accident.
Motorcycle.
Oh, is it a motorcycle? Okay.
Oh.
It just said, yeah, the thing that I'd read just said car
Okay.
accident. Maybe it said automobile. I
Yeah,
don't
he
know.
worked at Lift Studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he taught Neil how to like cross country ski or something too.
Oh.
I'd read. So they were really close. Yeah. So another, dark song written about, him losing
Yeah.
a friend.
And when you hear the stories of these songs, then you realize it's not just a song about some person who's, you know, being made up. Then you really feel this sadness. You know, the personal connection is what makes the song. It lends a lot of gravitas. You know, to throw out even bigger words this time with trenchant and gravitas, but it really does, you know, make the song heavy. And when you realize it's written for his friend, you know, it becomes a lot more meaningful. For sure.
I think what got me from After Image, I got my notes. It's very reflective lyrics, but besides even knowing about this tragedy it happened, and very reflective. I really like the running guitar melody in the song that Lifeson does, especially, you know, maybe pre verse or anything like that. But it's just, yeah, it's a very interesting song, but very reflective. Those lyrics I was really honed in on when I listened to them. Like, oh, this is a lot heavier than we thought. You know, so yeah, I get you guys there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the instrumental section in this. It's just kind of a little short jam session. It's just Rush being really great musicians. You know, that you don't get a ton of that, of really just them kind of jamming out.
And it doesn't sound sad. That's the thing. It's still kind of upbeat, this pulse.
Yeah.
You know, and then that, like you said, the instrumental song, it's there, but it doesn't sound sad. You know, they're not going out of their way to announce it. They're letting the lyrics tell you how sad it is, you know. Well, Red Sector A, speaking of, you know, this is a really stark song of survival, and it was inspired by Geddy Lee's parents telling him about their experiences in Nazi concentration camps during World War II. And they were at the same camp as Anne Frank. Apparently his mom was. So, and I think when I hear this music, it just kind of plods forward, this bass, and just kind of, it's real stark. There's not a lot of lush things going on. Everything's kind of differently. You hear the guitar and then the keyboards coming in, until it kind of comes back into symphonic during the chorus. But I wonder if that starkness and that plodding bass, it almost sounds, if it's supposed to be the reminiscent or this idea of the relentless toil of fear, you know, it's a pulse, or maybe it's supposed to be a life pulse, a heartbeat, you know, even during all this, we're still surviving. I don't know, but it's a bleak song for sure. And when you hear that story, it's like, oh, okay, wow, you know, it's amazing.
Well, I have in my notes on that one, I love the chorus, the melody, and it's a fan favorite, and it's very much a live staple ever since they released it. I mean, they played, you know, the hell out of that in their live shows. So, but yeah, I get what you're saying. There's just something. There's a haunting quality for that song.
And knowing that it's based on true stories and not just like he's writing some kind of a Orwellian dystopian fiction, because we're so used to that with his Pierce lyrics, you know, based on fiction like Red Barchetta or 2112. We're used to this kind of fantasy, science fiction. That's what I assumed until I read this. I assumed these stories, like, well, when we talk you know, and well, the next album borrows a song from Ray Bradbury, but when this one, yeah, so next song, the Body Electric.
Yeah.
So I assumed it was just a story, and now it's like, oh, okay, now it's a much more somber, meaningful song, and it's just more terrifying now than it was.
And from what I read, Neil was actually reading at this time a lot of accounts, like first person accounts also of people in different situations, particularly World War II in the camps and these, work camps and things. There was a story that he had read about people in a work camp in World War II who would they were starving, but they would were still trying to follow their religious doctrines, and they would give up there's this small piece of bread. Like if they were supposed to be fasting, they would still fast even though they were starving. They would get a little piece of bread every day, and they would give that up to follow to stick with their religious beliefs. And he thought that was really kind of beautiful in a way, or poetic, and it was kind of part of the thing that inspired the whole idea of grace under pressure. Like that was an example of there being in this horrid situations, people still doing things that he thought were beautiful and graceful, as human beings.
Absolutely.
Okay. Huh. Well, next we have The Enemy Within. You got this again, this reggae upbeat. They must have been really into reggae at this time. I mean, they started that in Spirit of Radio. I think you're getting that first taste of that reggae influence, but it's pretty frequently in these albums. As much as Lee was getting into keyboards and synthesizers, so they had this interesting mix. So I think that what we have here, the song focuses on trying to live life to the fullest in spite of the terrors that exist outside. We're our own worst enemy if we let fear dictate. These themes are still relevant, and you get this reggae upbeat. You're thinking it's going to be happy, but it's still a dark song.
Well, thanks, Montag, because I agreed with you on that. I put down my notes: reggae-ish guitar through the verses, has a catchy chorus. The synth use on this song, I didn't think it was overpowering, so that's what I put down.
Yeah,
it was very complimentary.
This being the part of this actually part one of the Fear trilogy. So basically, Witch Hunt dealt with the mob rule mentality. And then the weapon was dealt with how people use fears against you as a weapon, your fear. And then this one is more about a personal look at how fear affects the individual. These are all kind of looks at how fear
that's amazing
interacts in our world.
This is like a meta theme that he's working over 3-4 albums. That's God almighty. Oh, Neil Peart, man, how much I miss you. That's really beautiful. A grand meta theme, to talk about. And again, we're working in a 4.5 minute song here, and it's so succinct and precise, but still very much something that's bigger than itself. And this lyrically, it's works on multiple levels.
Whether you like the approach musically or not, there's still every bit the musicians they ever were, every bit the lyric writers that Neil is every bit the writer he ever was. None of that stuff is diminished, I don't think, at all. Whether you like the overall sound or not, does everything that Rush is still in there.
Great point.
And that's why you can always listen to these albums, no matter what. They're just good albums. I'll listen to any Rush album, put it on. This is why they're my favorite band. It's just because they just speak to me in so many levels. Speaking to me, the next song, Body Electric, is one of my favorite tracks on this album. I just love this song. It's based on a short story by Ray Bradbury, who had all these songs about robots and robot laws. And here's a robot on the run, like an android, and he said he's out seeking freedom for his life by changing his programming. And it's kind of heartbreaking. Again, we have this sense of freedom, but it's also heartbreaking. And if anyone out there is not familiar with Ray Bradbury, he's a science fiction writer, and his science fiction is considered soft as opposed to hard, like Arthur C. Clarke, or because it focuses on the human side of technology. So allowing us to understand that even the manufactured robots can have feelings. So, and I think the music sounds robotic. You get this drum-like, machine-like drum rhythms, that kind of aching guitar strumming coming in. And it's a very plodding kind of mechanical feel. And I think it's supposed to be like the robot. And then the chorus, I think, is just one of the most brilliantly sublime choruses I think I've ever heard. 1001001. It's
Right.
in machine code. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
I just love this song.
I think it's very you go back to, I think it's very Blade Runner-ish. Obviously, if I can associate a movie with a song, I'd associate this one with Blade Runner, the original. I had to laugh though that kind of like the funk intro bass line by Getty. That was kind of different. That was obviously out there. Catchy chorus again. That one, like you said, Montag, 10010.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Just, I pictured a Blade Runner movie in my head with this.
Mhm.
Well,
Well, the replicants looking to find their maker. Yeah. Well, and this one, that line where the robot bows his head in praise to the father of all machines, mother of all machines, bringing in this kind of sense of religion, that robots have a religion. There is a maker.
yeah.
Yeah. Again, the complexity, and that has to do with Bradbury, his take on robots.
Oh,
And,
definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Two geniuses at work here.
Absolutely.
Any
So,
thoughts
yeah.
on Dreadbull?
Yeah, I don't like this song.
Oh.
I don't like it. I kind of, I mean, great themes and writing aside, those are just a given almost, other than that one glaring bad lyric that he wrote back in 1980, but yeah, it's just so poppy. This like gives me these real strong like MTV, synth pop music video vibes. It's just like it's too poppy for me. And
Okay.
my one main complaint about this whole album is Alex really fell in love with this really tinny guitar sound that he just plays these chords that are real tinny and sort of ethereal, and
Hmm.
there's just single strums that he does like constantly. It's just constant throughout this album, and it grates. It really grates in my ears. I just don't like that sound. If you
Right.
can handle that sound, but there's something about that sound that he really fell in love with here that just irks me, and it's hard. It's always there because it's in almost every single song on this album. These tinny strums that he does,
Hmm.
and I don't like them, and it really messes with me throughout this entire album.
That's a criticism that I've heard before, and I kind of borrowed from what I heard that he talks about, and more so in the next album.
Okay.
But referring to his playing as very Spartan-like, but like these kind of trumpet blares, like he's being reduced to these just like little blasts, and I totally agree. This is why we're calling it this era. It's a synth era. And it doesn't reverse itself for a couple of years yet.
Right.
So, but no, I agree. I didn't know you hated it, but that's good to know.
It's just there's something about that particular sound that
I'm
really
playing it
irks
at
me.
your funeral when I'm doing your eulogy.
It's very loud and abrasive, and it's very trebly, and
it's a real
throughout this whole era we're talking about. That's
right.
Pretty pervasive.
Yeah.
So,
well, how do you feel about Kid Gloves there, Dreadbull?
Other than another very poppy song. Other than the really awesome guitar solo in the middle, which is really good.
Right.
Really smoking guitar solo.
Right.
Other than that, I'm not a fan
not
of
a
that
fan.
one.
Yeah, me neither. I was like in my notes, I'm like, meh. I like the guitar melody solo, but kind of the silly chorus as maybe one of the most silly choruses.
What I like about it is that is the cleverness of the lyrics. It's a simple yet clever song that reminds us to take better and more purposeful care of ourselves and one another in a rough world. This kind of theme are tight, the lyrics are tight and terse while being poignant, because I like the song, but it took a while for me when I started looking at it. And there's a lot of plays on words. I mean, because I think Peart is no longer writing fantasy, he's turned to wordplay and wordsmithing and to bring all those double entendres and as we'll see in other songs we're going to talk about in the next album, which I find to be like a challenging for him. But I didn't dislike it like you two, but I understand why. You know, when I first heard this album, I thought it was a really corny album. I was disappointed. I'm like, yeah. But looking back, I see really, even though like with you guys, this is not my favorite era of Rush. It's still Rush. I'll listen to it. You know, I'll enjoy it. You know, but that's interesting. Red Lenses. We continue this Cold War tension. I mean, pretty much out here we have this Cold War tension and fear. They resonate with obvious references to red and blue, and larger than that, the state of the world, the overhead, the underfed. And we have this kind of astronomical references to Mars and a play on Mercury, commentary, I think, on the bigger problem that exists in the world from politics. So, and this was the song that my cousin, her husband was a big Rush fan, and he wanted to introduce her to Rush. And this was the first song she heard, and she never wanted to listen to them again.
Not a good representation.
It's not. And I tried to beg her to
not.
listen to other songs. She's like, I don't want to. That was a stupid song. Red and Blue Lenses. Like, I'm like, I know it's not Rush though, you know, because I'm like wanting her to hear something from Hemispheres or, you know, from, you know, something else. Maybe something else from the Chew Bop. The Chew Bop records. Permanent Waves. You know, so yeah, I totally get it. Totally get it.
Yeah, this is a very different Rush song for me. It was odd, kind of spacey, and there were more enjoyable moments off this album. But yeah, that's what I think about Red Lenses. It didn't catch me, nothing about it.
Yeah, this track's a little progressive, kind of has a progressive feel, but it's a weird progressive. You know, the tempo changes are real jarring, and they feel kind of out of place on this. You know, it almost sounds like a jam session type song. It's almost, you know, I could believe that they just jammed and recorded it and threw it on the album in a way. But you know, I still like the fact that they threw kind of a prog track on there, but just not a real fan of the track itself.
Yeah. Well, I think the last song is a strong finish. This is a real talk about dark. Between the Wheels, and it's really about the dangers of living in the past and how it can prevent us from living in the now. And I love those minor chords that start the song with those appropriately dark lyrics. And like, you know, how that rabbit feels going under your speeding wheels, like windshields toward a fly, frozen in that fatal climb, but the wheels of time just passed you by. You know, this is, and I think when Neil said he wrote this, because he had realized when they were just so busy on the road playing 200 shows a year or whatever, you know, they were just so busy that when he was seeing friends, he had forgotten, like, oh my God, everyone's having their lives around me and kids are growing up. And, you know, these people are just, you know, and he wanted to just, he wasn't trying to reminisce, but he wanted to make more time to spend with these people now. Again, this is a theme we're going to see later on too, but he just wanted to enjoy the now. And while it's nice to think about, but not to get caught in the past, but don't keep being so busy that you forget to spend time with the people around you, because that's always going to change, and one day they're not going to be here. You know, yeah.
I thought it was at first, you know, revisiting the song, very plodding. And I was like, oh, that synth sounds so heavy, but interesting guitar work, and I like the song more when it picks up tempo. I really enjoy it when it picks up the more, you know, upbeat mid-tempo pace than that original, you know, you know, so for me, that's when it really catches me. That's when it really got me. So I like that. How about you, Dreadbull?
My favorite track on the album. I really like this song. I like that plodding beat. I like the keyboard that just kind of sets that plodding beat. I really love the little guitar riff underneath it that kind of complements it. Is really cool. It's got a real great instrumental section. I just like the darker vibe that this song has, and really although they all have dark themes, the music isn't that dark other than this
Mhm.
track, I would say. And yeah, I just like the darkness of this whole track. Cool
Yeah.
song.
Yeah. To me, I focus on the lyrics so much on these this era because the music is less outstanding.
Mm.
It's competent, it's good,
Mhm.
but it's
It's
you know,
more subtle.
it is, and it's subdued in a way. So for me, I turn to the lyrics, and that's where I find. And Peart's writing also changes. They've changed what he writes about is changing too.
Mhm.
So I don't think you could have had these lyrics with something from Hemispheres or Permanent Waves. You couldn't have had that kind of, I can't imagine this epic feel to any of these songs, as
Right.
far as the kind of instrumentation that they'd had before. So I think as just a band, they were just evolving.
Well, and you think yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I said they've been around for 10 years and
Yeah.
they were putting out these great albums, and they were just moving along into this new era, and they were just changing and growing as artists.
Yeah, and it's people. I mean, Neil is
Mhm.
just you can see the evolution in him as a person. He's becoming more, introspective and more, he's kind of taking in the world around him and thinking about things and life in general. And it's less about fantasy songs and
Right. And sci-fi.
castles
Yeah.
and warlocks, and more about
Right.
just personal observations. This is what happens as you get older.
Exactly. Right.
And
Good point.
your viewpoint changes on things, and you start to think about different things in your life. And
Mhm.
yeah, you just see
What's important and what's not, and
Mhm.
right. So yeah, I think it shows an interesting progression
Mhm.
that this is going to continue. This stuff, this is going to continue for the rest of Rush.
And I
The kind
just
of things they write. This is going forward. These are themes that
All
are
the
going
way
to be here for for 20 years.
and as I think about it, it's almost like this Rush as a whole, the whole career is almost like Neil's personal diary. Like this is a catalog of all of his deepest thoughts and feelings as he went through his life. On everything that he ever thought about, probably.
We're in about an hour now.
Okay.
How about you want to break this up and make it 2 parts? I'm cool with that. I mean, I have no problem because it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
mean-
kind of think we should actually.
Hello, kiddies. This is Montag, Master of Illusion, and you have been listening to part 1 of Rush Deep Dive number 3. Stay tuned next week as we finish Synth Under Pressure.
This is Doug Helvering, and you have been listening to Heavy Metal Horror, the best podcast that you've never heard before.